Sometimes the hardest thing to do in sports is live up to expectations. Expectations that your talent brings with it. Expectations of the footsteps that you follow in. And in the case of Spencer Rattler, he's got a lot of expectations of both. Here's a guy that was the #1 quarterback prospect a couple of years ago in the country, and then he ends up agreeing to go to Oklahoma. Oklahoma, who has a recent run of putting guys in the league at the quarterback position: Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, Jalen Hurts. You're following in the footsteps of 3 guys, 2 of which were Heisman Trophy guys, 1 of which was a runner-up. It's a high-pressure spot for Spencer Rattler to come in as a redshirt freshman in 2020. In his 11 games last year, he had a relatively impressive start to his college career, completed over 67% of his passes, 28 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, 6 rushing touchdowns. Had some struggles, admittedly, at times earlier on in the year. Got benched at one point in time during the Red River rivalry game against Texas. But you can certainly see some growth and progression as the season went along. But this is a guy that was highly touted coming out of high school, comes into a situation where you're playing in Lincoln Riley's offense. This Lincoln Riley offense has meant some big things for other quarterbacks in recent years. It's a lot of pressure to live up to. And what I will say about Spencer Rattler, the one thing that strikes you when you watch him is just how much athletic upside he has. It is striking. It is obvious. You're seeing a young man with some special physical talents. There's no question about that. So, as I stand here now, where you're going to hear me talk about his strengths and certainly his weaknesses, and talk about where, if I had to grade him in the draft right now, where I would grade him, keep that in mind, is that I'm going off of what I actually saw in that one college season, and he's only going to be a redshirt sophomore this upcoming year, so there's no doubt that my perspective on him could change a little bit. But let me talk about where I do see Spencer Rattler now. And one last thing. For those of you that watched the Sam Howell scouting report, if you didn't, you should go ahead and check that out. And you should also smash that subscribe button so that way when I upload some of these other quarterback scouting reports, you're getting updated so that way you can know when to watch them. Please keep in mind when you're saying hey, you've done him, can you do him? The answer is if they're a notable quarterback prospect in the 2022 NFL Draft, I'm going to get to them sometime between now and the next few weeks. So you don't have to come here to Spencer Rattler and say, do Sam Howell. Well, A, I already did do a video on Sam Howell. Then B, don't come and say, do Desmond Riddler, do the Clovis kid, do Malik Willis. I'm going to get to all of them. Okay, folks? Thank you. All right, so let's talk about Spencer Rattler, the prospect, and what I saw on his 2020 film. In terms of his biggest strengths, he's got a decent arm to make all the required NFL throws. I don't think he has a hose. I don't think he has elite arm strength. I think he has a decent arm, enough to make the required NFL throws. Probably something that if he put on a little bit of muscle and put a little more work into it, he could get a little bit stronger in terms of his arm strength, but be able to put even more zip on the ball, which would make him, I think, a little more dangerous. But he's got decent arm strength, enough to make all the required throws. He does have the ability to improvise and create when the initial structure breaks down. And let's face it, in today's NFL, you have to be able to do that. You're not going to be able to throw from a perfect pocket every time. You're not going to be able to just sit there and wait for the structure to always pan out, because sometimes it's not. A structure breaks down. The defense does something that you don't anticipate. You've got to be able to adjust and create on the fly. And one thing you saw in Spencer Rattler in 2020 is a consistent ability to be able to do that and a comfort level with being able to do that. He's got really light and super quick feet to extend plays and get yards as a runner. I don't think he's explosive, game-changing difference maker type of Lamar Jackson type, Michael Vick type of runner or anything like that. But he's a guy that can be a scrambling threat. He's a guy that can extend plays with his feet. He can get out of trouble in a hurry, and you really, really like that. Again, fitting kind of that modern mold of the NFL starting quarterback. He shows great consistent touch on placement on his deep throws. Where I talked about with Sam Howell, I was impressed with the great touch that he had on the deep ball. Spencer Rattler also had a similar level of just elite level touch from a kid that's so relatively young and inexperienced as a deep thrower. not only would he get it into the ballpark, but he would hit guys in stride perfectly right in their hands. Now, obviously, that didn't happen every time, and, you know, you're talking about throwing the ball 35, 40, 50 yards down the field. Like, you can have a little bit of variance there, but his ability to get it into the right window, like, was incredibly impressive, both from a standing position and sometimes on the move as well. He's got really good ball placement generally on short and intermediate throws, where I thought Sam Howell's ball placement was a little scattered at times, especially when he was on the move. Spencer Rattler had really good ball placement relatively consistently. Sure, like always, you're going to have some misses, but general rule here is what I'm talking about. He's got pretty good ball placement on short and intermediate throws, and he's really smooth and accurate throwing the football on the move, which is something I really liked about him. Whereas you worry about some guys sometimes that they're not throwing from a solid base, or they have to turn their body, turn their shoulders, and throw in order to be able to throw into the ball. Spencer Rattler, you don't have to worry about that with him. He's really good throwing on the move. Now, as I would have expected for a young, inexperienced quarterback, he had a lot of bad things, some bad traits, some that concerned me more than others when I watched his film in 2020. He had a bad habit of bailing out of the pocket too early, running himself into sacks, fucking up his protection, just putting himself into a bad spot. And that's a bad habit. That's one of those things that could borderline be a deal breaker at times. Because he didn't just do it like every once in a while. He did it a lot. A lot to the point where it could be really, really concerning. Because it's hard to create a lot of structure if a guy at the first sign of any trouble or the first sign of anything is just looking to get the hell out of Dodge. And some of that, too, led to the next problem, which is he could end up getting in some trouble at the NFL level if this continues with some of those across his body throws. You're going to hear some Mahomes comparisons with him because of his panache for making those across the body throws and making a big plays happen as a result. But he doesn't have that Mahomes level of arm strength. He does not. Not that what I saw in 2020. And sometimes those throws across his body are because he's not staying his ass in the damn pocket when he should. Or maybe instead of, scrambling out of dodge, just a subtle movement, that presence within the pocket, the feel to know, I need to move left a little bit, shift right, shift back, shift forward. Like some flashes of that, but certainly not on a consistent basis. You consistently saw him bail out of the pocket and run himself into trouble, put himself in a position where he had to make more throws across his body, which is a bad thing. He also had a really bad tendency to lock onto his primary read. And this was worse than Howell's. He really, really locked in on his primary read, his primary area, his primary target. He would miss, throws like easy crosses. Like you're so obvious, you're watching, you're like, how the fuck does he not see that? He's so laser focused that he misses it. He showed some feel to be able to move the safeties with his eyes from time to time in 2020. But in terms of some of the more baseline, consistent throws that you need him to make, like you're going to have to come off of your primary read, and he was terrible at that in 2020. There's just no other way to put it. So many times you could see, even if you threw to a guy that was kind of open, you're sitting there saying, okay, you throw to this guy that's a little open. If you just looked slightly to the left, you would have seen that he was way the hell open, and that's the better throw to make. And that could suggest some concerns about whether or not he's doing a good job of recognizing the defenses pre-snap if he's able to react to them initially. And that could be something that comes with time, experience, but right now it's certainly a major flaw in his game. He also has a little bit of fuck the world type of mentality, risk it for the biscuit, because he will force some throws that will be INTs at the NFL level. Some of them were at the college level. If he makes some of those throws that he makes at the college level, at the NFL level, he's going to have even more interceptions, and some of them could be really back-breaking. Like you saw that in 2020, especially early on in the year with the back-to-back losses. At one point in time, like I said, in the second quarter, he got benched against Texas because he will make some back-breaking mistakes, or at least he did early on in the year in 2020. And, sometimes you live by the sword, you die by the sword, but with Spencer Rattler, some of those mistakes are just really, really bad. He had more fumbles than you would like to see from a quarterback. Got to be able to protect the ball a little bit better. I missed the underneath linebacker in zone coverage quite a bit. Like, not just a thing of the linebacker really tricked him or anything. Like, the linebacker would just drop back into his spot in zone coverage, and Rattler would throw right to him. Like, he never saw him, which again gets back to the bad habits, which is, just locking in on that primary read and not being able to see the rest of the field. We also see a lot of all-arm, no lower body throws, which I think at times is really helpful for him because it allows him to get rid of the ball even quicker. He could react really quickly and get rid of the ball. Some other guys can't do that. So that could be a good trait, but it can also be a bad trait because it means sometimes you're not utilizing your whole body in your throwing motion, which can impact your accuracy, which can impact your throw velocity. You would like to see him work on that. When I was thinking about early player comparison, as I'm watching some of the footage from 2020, different people are comparing to Mahomes. I guess it's like light-skinned dude that throws across his body and played in the Big 12, so that's got to be the comparison. No, I don't think it is. I see elements of it, sure, but you can say that you see elements of him with a lot of guys. I even see a couple of Baker Mayfield elements to him, or a Kyler Murray element, especially as a runner from time to time. I think the most accurate player comparison I look at right now is a Russell Wilson, and here's what I mean. He's got some really nice arm talent. He's got great touch on the deep ball. Russell's always had great touch, elite touch on the deep ball. He's got an elite ability to improvise, extend plays, pull a rabbit out of his hat or out of his ass. Again, just like Russell Wilson. Just like Russell Wilson, though, he can also cause protection problems with his early scrambling. Like, people always talk about Seattle and their inability to get an offensive line that can protect Russell Wilson. Yes, that's somewhat true, but it's also somewhat true that Russ at times is his own worst enemy and his offensive line's own worst enemy because he bails the fuck out of the pocket too early and he breaks down his damn protection. Both can be true, and both are. And you see that element in Russell Wilson's game. After 9 years in the league, it's still there. Spencer Rattler could be the same type of thing. And similar to Russell Wilson, Rattler can be prone to having some high turnover games. That happened a little bit more earlier on in the season, but you could see it there because there's this huge level of confidence in his physical talents. So he's going to take some risk and going to take some chances and make some home run swings. And sometimes that's going to work splendidly. And other times it's going to lead to some train wreck performances. And you've seen that with Russ over the years, including in the playoffs. Like, he'll have one of those stinkers every once in a while where he throws 3 or 4 picks and he just looks terrible. I can see Spencer Rattler having some of those games that he has to work through, especially early in his career. But the upside is intriguing. Like, I think Spencer Rattler is a little bit better in terms of polish as a prospect right now, but Sam Howell also has 2 years as a starter. Spencer Rattler has 1. I fully expect in a year from now, we could, when we get to after the 2021 season, we could be looking at Spencer Rattler being ahead of Sam Howell as a prospect. Right now, I don't think he is. I've got an early second-round draft grade on him because, not only does he have weaknesses and flaws, which all of these quarterbacks I'm going to talk about in the weeks to come are going to have, some of his are really noticeable and really concerning if he doesn't get a cap on him and if he doesn't improve in some of those areas. The type of flaws that could really, really hold him back from unleashing his massive upside and true potential as a passer, as an NFL quarterback. I can certainly see coming back in 5 or 6 months from now, coming on here, doing another scouting report on Spencer Rattler and say, you know what? Some of that shit I talked about in June, he worked on some of that. This is QB1 in this draft. I can absolutely see that. I could also see a situation where he puts up massive numbers in that Oklahoma system in year 2 as a starter in 2021, and people are going to call him quarterback 1, and I'm going to come on here and talk about, he still hasn't fixed these things. These aren't small issues. You're overrating the fuck out of him. Either can happen. We'll find out in about 5 or 6 months what is really the case here, but I see the upside, and it is incredibly intriguing. But like, if this was a situation where you were picking a guy for the future, there's a number of concerns here. Like, the talent and the upside and is there. The potential is absolutely there. But I would not call him QB1 right now for the 2022 NFL draft. He could become it, but right now, no, he's not it.